Kelsey's obviously, she makes my life easier out there, and it's, it's hard to pick and choose when, both of us are on.
Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Alright, so let's just call it exactly what it is. This was the most predictable move possible. Kelsey Mitchell signs the one-year SUPERMAX, and while some people are reacting like this changes everything for the Indiana Fever, it really doesn't. Not for this season anyway. What it does change is the future, because once you see a one-year SUPERMAX deal, you already know how this story likely ends. Players don't take one-year max deals if they're fully committed long-term. They just don't. If Kelsey Mitchell saw herself as a cornerstone for the next 3 to 4 years in Indiana, she would have locked in a multi-year deal. That's just how star players operate in this league. So yeah, she's here for now, but long-term, it's looking like a one-and-done situation. Now, let's be clear about something. This doesn't hurt the Fever this year. If anything, it keeps them competitive. You're still rolling out a core with Kelsey Mitchell, Caitlin Clark, and Aliyah Boston, and that's a legit trio. That's a playoff team. No debate. But here's where things get tricky. Running it back sounds nice in theory. Continuity, chemistry, familiarity, all of that matters. But if we're being real, this roster as currently constructed is not a championship-level team. It's good. It might even be very good. But very good doesn't win you a title in today's WNBA. And when you stack them up against the top teams, that's where the concerns start creeping in. The New York Liberty? That's a serious operation. Top to bottom, that roster is built to dominate. The Las Vegas Aces? Still elite, still dangerous, still the standard. Even teams like the Atlanta Dream are improving and closing that gap. So if Indiana just runs it back exactly as is, are they better than those teams? I don't see it. And then there's the bigger philosophical issue, the play style. Because what we saw from the Fever in the playoffs last year was not sustainable, especially not with Caitlin Clark now being the centerpiece of the franchise. That slow-paced, defensive, isolation-heavy system, that's not maximizing Caitlin Clark. Not even close. You can't run a your-turn, my-turn offense with isolation scorers and expect it to work with a generational playmaker like Clark. That's just bad roster optimization. If anything, the entire system needs to flip. Faster pace, more spacing, more ball movement. Let Caitlin orchestrate. If you're not willing to do that, then honestly, it makes no sense to have her as your franchise player. That's how serious the mismatch would be. So now the Fever are in this weird middle ground. They've committed to the big three for this season. That part is clear. But what about the rest of the roster? The Lexie Hull situation is looming. There's a decent chance she stays, but it's not guaranteed. Sophie Cunningham? That's another coin flip. And then you've got potential additions like Natasha Howard, who could fill a major role at the 4. But even if you bring those pieces back, does it move the needle enough? Maybe a little, not massively. If everything stays relatively similar, you're probably looking at a team in that mid-tier playoff range again. Somewhere around 25 to 27 wins feels realistic. Competitive, dangerous on a good night, but not quite a true contender. And that brings us back to Kelsey Mitchell, because from her perspective, this makes perfect sense. She earned that SUPERMAX, every bit of it, no question. Especially with Caitlin Clark still on a rookie-scale deal, this was her window to maximize earnings, and she took it, as she should. But from a team-building standpoint, well, it complicates things. We've seen other stars, players like Alishia Gray, Marina Mabrey, even Erica Wheeler-type contracts, take slightly less money over multiple years to help their teams build deeper, more balanced rosters. Kelsey didn't do that. And again, that's her right. This is a business. But it does signal priorities. It tells you that long-term flexibility for the franchise wasn't the driving force here. And the Fever? Well, they didn't really have a choice. They couldn't commit to that SUPERMAX number across multiple seasons and still build a contender around it. So this one-year structure almost feels like a compromise. Keep her now, figure it out later. But later is coming fast. Because once this season ends, the Fever could be looking at losing one of their biggest stars for nothing. No trade assets, no return, just cap space and questions. And that's the part that's a little concerning. Indiana isn't exactly stacked with future assets. They're not a team that heavily leverages overseas pipelines. Their draft flexibility isn't elite. So if Kelsey walks, what's the pivot? That's the big unknown right now. It honestly feels like the Fever have pushed a lot of their chips into this one season, hoping that internal growth and maybe one or two moves can elevate them into that top tier. But if it doesn't, you're looking at a reset sooner than expected. Still, credit where it's due, Kelsey Mitchell got paid, and she deserved it. Now the pressure shifts to the Fever front office, because one thing is clear, this isn't just about this season anymore. This is about whether they actually have a long-term plan, or if they're just buying time. All right, now let's move here, because this is where things actually get interesting for the Indiana Fever. This is one of those moves where you look at it and go, hold on, they might actually be cooking something. Because if this happens, if they pull this off, you're looking at what could very realistically be the best backup point guard in the WNBA. I'm not even hedging that. No qualifiers, no maybe top 3. I'm saying straight up, best backup guard in the league. And we're talking about Tyasha Harris. Now, if you've been paying attention to the little clues, the breadcrumbs, the social media activity, this didn't just come out of nowhere. There were signs. People just didn't catch them early enough. You've got posts floating around, subtle hints, interactions, people saying, "You looked good yesterday," references to Indiana, the Fever wordplay. It's all there. And when you connect the dots, it really does feel like something is building behind the scenes. And if you're a Fever fan, you should be excited. Because let's address the biggest misconception right away. This idea that Tyasha Harris is injury-prone. That narrative gets thrown around way too loosely. She had a rough stretch last season, yes. Started the year injured, limited minutes, didn't really find rhythm. But that doesn't suddenly define a player's entire profile. If anything, you should be looking at the year before that. 10+ points per game. Pause. Around 40% from 3. Pause. Efficient. Pause. Low turnovers. Pause. Smart decision-making. That's the real Tyasha Harris. She's not a volume scorer. She's not going to dominate the ball. What she is, though, is exactly the kind of guard you want next to a player like Caitlin Clark. She plays off-ball. She spaces the floor. She doesn't make mistakes. She keeps things organized. It's that classic, steady, complementary guard archetype. Someone who can run the offense when needed, but doesn't need to control everything. And in a system built around Caitlin, that's incredibly valuable. And here's the part people are underrating. This isn't just a solid backup. This is a player who could legitimately start on multiple teams in the league. That's why I'm so high on this, because when you compare her to other backup guards around the W, it's not really close. She's a tier above, better than your typical second unit options, more reliable, more efficient, more scalable alongside star players. And the connection with Stephanie White, that matters. Tyasha Harris had her best season under Steph. That's not a coincidence. Coaches trust players they've already had success with, especially in systems where fit and decision-making are everything. So from a basketball standpoint, this makes perfect sense. From a market standpoint, it makes even more sense. Because here's the reality. This is not a guard-heavy spending market right now. Teams are prioritizing wings. They're prioritizing forwards. That's where the money is going. Backup guards? They're not getting paid like that unless they're elite or have a very specific niche. And that's where the Fever might have found their window. Because Tyasha Harris is coming off a down year statistically. Injuries, limited role, low usage, all of that lowers her immediate market value. But the underlying skill set, still there, which means you could realistically get her on a value deal, maybe even a one-year prove-it contract, a bet-on-yourself type of situation where she rebuilds her stock in a structured system. And if that's the case, that's a steal. We're talking potentially $500K or less for a player of this caliber. In this market, That's elite value. That's the kind of move that gives you flexibility to address other positions, while still upgrading your guard rotation. And let's not forget, this is a player who was a key piece in a major trade involving Alyssa Thomas. Teams value her. Front offices understand what she brings. This isn't some random pickup. This is calculated. Now, how does this impact the bigger picture? It gives the Fever stability behind Caitlin Clark. It gives them insurance. It gives them lineup versatility. You can play them together. You can stagger them. You can trust your offense doesn't fall apart when Caitlin sits. That's huge. Because one of the biggest issues for teams with ball-dominant stars is what happens when they go to the bench. With Tyasha Harris, that drop-off becomes minimal. And honestly, if this deal comes in at the right price, it might end up being one of the smartest moves of their entire offseason. Now, does it solve everything? No. The front court still needs work. The Sophie Cunningham situation is still unresolved. There are still roster balance questions. But this is a step in the right direction. And I'll say it again. On paper, if this goes through, the Indiana Fever will have the best backup point guard in the WNBA. That's not hype. That's just what it is.
All right, tell me what you think. Don't forget like and subscribe.